The signal came from the edge of known space. It was weak and broken, filled with static and fear. Admiral sat in her command chair aboard the battleship Iron Mountain and listened to it for the third time. The voice was not human. It belonged to something alien, something desperate. "Please," the voice said through the speakers. "Anyone who can hear this. We are dying, they are killing us, our children, our elders, everyone, please, we have no weapons, we have no ships that can fight. We are farmers, we are builders, we are not warriors, please help us, please." The message repeated again and again. It had been playing for 6 days straight before human sensors picked it up, closed her eyes and felt something heavy in her chest. She had been a soldier for 23 years. She had seen many terrible things. But something about this voice, this pleading cry from across the stars, made her feel cold inside. "Admiral," her second-in-command said. His name was Ho, a tall man with gray at his temples and steady hands. "The council wants your assessment." Opened her eyes. "My assessment is simple. Someone is asking for help. We should give it." Ho nodded slowly. "We have records of them. A peaceful species. 6 limbs. They build beautiful structures and grow food that can survive in almost any soil. They have never fought a war in their entire history." In the asked, "Conquerors, they take what they want. They have destroyed 11 species in the last 200 years. Not defeated, destroyed, completely." Ho paused. "The galaxy considers them unstoppable." Stood up from her chair. She walked to the large window at the front of the bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, millions of innocent beings were dying. They had done nothing wrong. They had simply existed in a universe where stronger creatures could take everything from weaker ones. "Send the message to Earth," she said. "Tell them what we found. Tell them what I think we should do." The response from Earth came faster than anyone expected. The United Human Council held an emergency meeting that lasted only 4 hours. Representatives from every nation on Earth and every colony in human space voted on a single question: should humanity go to war for strangers? The vote was not close, it was almost unanimous. Received the orders on her personal screen. She read them 3 times to make sure she understood. Then she called her senior officers to the briefing room. "We are going to war," she told them. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were bright. "Not for territory, not for resources, not for revenge. We are going to war because someone asked for help, and we are the only ones who answered." Commander raised her hand. She was young, only 32, but she had already proven herself in 3 border conflicts. "Admiral, do we know anything about military strength?" "We know they have never lost," said. "We know they have more ships than us. We know they have been fighting wars for longer than humans have been in space." "Then how do we win?" another officer asked. Smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had made peace with hard truths. "We win by being what we have always been. Humans do not fight fair. We do not follow rules that help our enemies. When we go to war, we go to total war. Every factory, every ship, every person who can hold a weapon or build a bullet or drive a transport, everything we have, everything we are." The officers were silent for a moment, then spoke again. "They do not even know us. Why would we sacrifice so much for them?" Thought about this question. She had asked herself the same thing when she first heard the distress signal. The answer had come to her slowly, like sunrise over a dark ocean. "Because that is who we are," she said. "Humans protect the weak. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. It is written in our oldest stories. It is carved into our bones. When someone cries for help, we answer. That is what makes us human." Across human space, the word spread like fire. The distress signal was broadcast on every news channel. People watched the footage of burning cities and fleeing civilians. They heard the desperate pleas for help. And something woke up inside them, something old and fierce. Factories that had been building civilian goods switched to weapons and armor. Shipyards that had been constructing exploration vessels began making warships. Men and women who had never held a gun lined up at recruitment centers by the millions. On Earth, a retired general named Sung watched the news with tears in his eyes. He was 78 years old and his body was weak, but his mind was still sharp. He called the military headquarters and volunteered to help plan the campaign. They accepted him within the hour. On Mars, a young engineer named Bai worked for 3 days without sleep to design a new type of armor that could withstand weapons. Her team told her it was impossible. She proved them wrong. On the colony world of New Sol, a farmer named packed up his belongings and said goodbye to his family. His wife held him tight and told him to come home safe. His children cried and asked why he had to go. He knelt down and looked them in the eyes. "There are children like you far away," he said. "Bad things are happening to them. Someone has to help. That someone is me." The first fleet assembled in just 3 weeks. 47 warships, 200 transport vessels, 50,000 soldiers. It was the fastest military mobilization in human history, and it was only the beginning. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Iron Mountain as the fleet prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. She looked at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there, they were still dying, but not for much longer. "All ships," she said into the comm system. "This is Admiral. Today we begin a journey that will test everything we are. We go to fight for people we have never met in a war we did not start against an enemy that has never been beaten. Some of us will not come home, but every one of us will be remembered, because today humanity shows the galaxy what we truly are." She paused and took a deep breath. "Set course for Prime. Jump on my mark." The countdown began. Engines powered up across the fleet. Soldiers checked their weapons one last time. Officers reviewed their orders. And in the cold silence of space, 47 human warships vanished into the light, racing toward a distant world where innocent beings waited for salvation. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. A species going to total war for complete strangers. It made no sense to the other races. It all logic and reason. But humans had never cared much for logic when lives were at stake. They cared about doing what was right. And right now, what was right was war. The news of humanity's decision spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Every species with access to communication networks heard the same story. The humans were going to war, not for themselves, for the. Most species did not understand. A race of traders who valued profit above all else called it madness. The ancient beings who had watched empires rise and fall for thousands of years called it suicide. They themselves heard the news and laughed. "Let them come," the war commander said to his generals. "We will add human skulls to our collection." But while the galaxy doubted, humanity worked. On Earth, every factory that could be converted began producing weapons. Automobile plants made tanks. Electronics companies built targeting systems. Food processing facilities switched to military rations. The change happened so fast that economists could not keep track of it. Commander Ho oversaw the fleet assembly from the orbital station above Earth. Every hour, new ships arrived. Some were military vessels that had been patrolling distant sectors. Others were civilian ships that had been modified with armor and weapons. Freighters became troop transports. Mining vessels became supply carriers. Even luxury cruise ships were stripped of their fancy decorations and filled with soldiers instead of tourists. "We have 120 ships now," his assistant reported, "and more coming every day." Ho nodded but did not smile. "It is not enough. They have over 1,000 warships. We need more." "Sir, we are building as fast as we can." "Then we need to build faster." The recruitment centers across human space could not handle the flood of volunteers. Lines stretched for kilometers. People waited for days just to sign their names. Young people fresh from school stood next to old veterans who had not held a weapon in decades. Rich and poor stood side by side. Scientists and farmers, artists and engineers, All of them wanted the same thing. They wanted to help. A journalist named One traveled to the largest recruitment center on Earth to understand why so many people were volunteering. She interviewed hundreds of men and women waiting in line. "I saw the videos," a young man told her. "I saw those children running from the bombs. They looked so scared. Someone has to help them." "I do not even know what it looks like," an older woman said. "But I know what fear looks like. I know what suffering looks like. That is enough." "My grandfather fought in the last war on Earth," a teenager explained. "He always told me that the measure of a person is what they do when others need help. I want to measure up." The stories were all different, but they shared the same heart. Humans saw suffering and felt the need to stop it. It was not a calculated decision. It was not a strategic choice. It was simply who they were. General Sung, the retired commander who had volunteered despite his age, worked around the clock to plan the campaign. He had fought many battles in his long career, but none like this. He was not defending human territory. He was not protecting human interests. He was trying to save an entire species from extinction. "The is here," he explained to his planning team, pointing at a star map. "They have surrounded it with a fleet of about 200 ships. They are taking their time, enjoying the conquest. That gives us an advantage." "What advantage?" one of the young officers asked. "They do not expect us to arrive so quickly. They do not expect us to arrive at all, really. Every other species in the galaxy has abandoned the think they have all the time in the universe." Sung smiled grimly. "They are wrong." The plan was bold and dangerous. The human fleet would jump directly into the system and engage the immediately. There would be no negotiation, no warning, no mercy. They had shown no mercy to their victims. They would receive none in return. Engineer Bai finished her new armor design and sent it to every manufacturing facility in human space. The armor was lighter than previous versions but stronger. It could absorb energy weapons and protect the wearer from almost any attack. Soldiers who tested it called it a miracle. "It is not a miracle," Bai told them. "It is science and hard work. Now go use it to save those people." The second fleet departed 3 weeks after the first. This one was even larger: 80 warships, 300 transports, 100,000 soldiers. Admiral's first fleet would hit the hard and fast. The second fleet would follow up and finish the job. But the mobilization did not stop there. A third fleet began forming, then a fourth. Humanity was not just responding to a crisis. Humanity was preparing for a long war. On the colony world of Haven, a group of doctors and nurses packed medical supplies into cargo containers. They were not soldiers. They could not fight, but they could heal the wounded and comfort the dying. They called themselves the Mercy Corps, and they were determined to show that humans brought more than just weapons to war. The leader of the Mercy Corps was a surgeon named Mi Young. She had spent 20 years treating patients in the parts of human space. She had seen suffering and death many times, but she had never been to a war zone. "Are you scared?" one of the younger nurses asked her. "Yes," Mi Young admitted. "But fear is not a reason to stay home. Fear is a reason to be careful. We will be careful, and we will save as many lives as we can." The galactic community watched all of this with growing disbelief. No species had ever mobilized so quickly. No species had ever sacrificed so much for strangers. The traders adjusted their predictions and began selling shares in human military companies. The elders held emergency meetings to discuss what this meant for the balance of power in the galaxy. And the finally stopped laughing. Intelligence reports reached the war commander about the size of the human response. He read them once, then read them again. The numbers did not make sense. No rational species would commit such resources to save aliens they had never met. "They are bluffing," one of his advisors suggested. "They cannot possibly send so many ships." "And if they are not bluffing?" the war commander asked. No one had an answer. The first human fleet arrived at the edge of the system after 2 weeks of travel. Admiral ordered all ships to hold position while scouts surveyed the situation. What they found was worse than expected. There was burning. Entire cities had been reduced to ash. Millions of refugees crowded into the remaining safe zones, waiting for death or salvation. The fleet orbited the planet like vultures, occasionally sending down ships to attack another target. Admiral Ho said quietly, "We are outnumbered 4-1. Did not look away from her jaw was tight, her eyes were hard. "I know. Some officers are suggesting we wait for the second fleet. If we wait, more die. Every hour we delay, thousands more innocent beings are killed." Finally turned to face her second in command. "We did not come all this way to wait. We came to fight." She activated the fleet-wide communication system. Her voice was steady and clear. "All ships, this is Admiral. Ahead of us is an enemy that has never been defeated. Behind us are millions of people counting on us to save them. I will not lie to you. This will be hard. Some of us will die. But I want every one of you to remember why we are here. We are here because innocent people asked for help. We are here because no one else would come. We are here because we are human, and this is what humans do." She paused and looked around her bridge. Every officer stood at attention. Every face showed determination. "All ships, battle formation. We attack in 10 minutes. May we all find the courage we need." The fleet began to move. 47 human warships against 200 vessels. The odds were terrible. The outcome was uncertain, but not a single human ship turned back. They had come to answer a plea for help, and they would answer it with everything they had. The battle began with fire and fury. Admiral had divided her fleet into 3 groups. The first group, led by herself on the Iron Mountain, would attack the main formation head-on. The second group, commanded by Captain, would circle around and hit the enemy from the side. The third group would hang back and protect the transport ships carrying ground troops. "All weapons ready," the weapons officer reported. "Targets locked." Watched the fleet on her. The enemy ships were large and heavily armored, built for conquest and destruction. Each one had killed thousands of beings across dozens of worlds. Today, they would face something they had never encountered before. Fire said. The first volley tore across the void of space. Human missiles and energy beams slammed into the formation. 3 enemy ships exploded immediately. 4 more took heavy damage. They had not expected such a fierce opening attack. "They are returning fire," the tactical officer warned. Weapons lit up the darkness. Green energy bolts streaked toward the human fleet. The Iron Mountain shook as its shields absorbed hit after hit. Warning alarms blared throughout the ship. "Shields holding," the engineering officer reported. "Barely." Gripped the arms of her command chair. "Keep firing. Do not let them recover." The battle quickly became chaos. Ships on both sides exploded and burned. Debris filled the space between the 2 fleets. Pilots fought desperately in small fighters, weaving between the larger vessels. Every second brought new death. Captain led her attack group around the enemy flank as planned. Her ship, the Dawn Striker, was smaller and faster than the Iron Mountain. It was perfect for quick strikes and rapid movements. "Target their command ships," she ordered. "Cut off the head and the body will die." Her group focused their fire on the largest vessels. One by one, the enemy command ships took damage. One by one, they lost their ability to coordinate. On the planet below, they watched the battle with hope they had not felt in months. Elder, the leader of the last remaining government, stood in a bunker beneath the ruins of the capital city. The bunker was crowded with survivors. Children cried. Adults whispered prayers. "They came," said softly, watching the flashes of light in the sky. "The humans actually came." The young beside him could not understand. "Why would they help us? They do not know us. We have nothing to offer them." Had no answer. He only knew that ships were fighting and dying above his world, and those ships were not fighting for themselves. They were fighting for his people. It was the most beautiful and terrible thing he had ever seen. Back in orbit, the battle had lasted for 3 hours. The human fleet had lost 12 ships. The had lost over 60. It was an incredible exchange rate, but knew they could not keep it up forever. Admiral Ho said, "The enemy is regrouping. They are pulling back toward the far side of the planet. They are trying to reestablish their command structure," realized. "We hurt them badly. They did not expect us to be so aggressive. What do we do now?" Thought quickly. They had achieved surprise and dealt serious damage, but the still outnumbered them significantly. If the enemy recovered and counterattacked in force, the human fleet could be overwhelmed. "We need to get troops on the ground," she decided. "If we can establish a presence on the planet, they cannot simply bomb them from orbit. They would risk hitting their own enemies." It was a risky plan. Landing troops during a space battle was extremely dangerous, but saw no other option. "Signal Captain, tell her to provide cover for the transports. We are going in." The transport ships, protected by a ring of warships, began their descent toward the planet. They tried to intercept them, but the attack group was relentless. Every enemy ship that moved toward the transports was hit from multiple angles. Commander was aboard one of those transports. The farmer who had left his family on New Sol now wore armor and carried a rifle. He was surrounded by other soldiers, many of them as inexperienced as himself. Their faces were pale. Their hands trembled, but none of them complained. "Landing in 2 minutes," the pilot announced. Looked out the small window beside his seat. He could see the planet below, brown and green and blue. He could see the black smoke rising from burning cities. He could see tiny figures running across the ground, fleeing from destruction. Those were the people he had come to save. "Listen up," the squad leader shouted over the noise of the descent. "When we land, we move fast. Our job is to secure a safe zone for the refugees. We protect them. We get them to safety. That is our mission. Understood?" "Understood," the soldiers shouted back. The transport hit the ground hard. The doors flew open. Soldiers poured out into a landscape of ruins and fire. Ran with them, his heart pounding in his chest. The first thing he noticed was the sound. Explosions in the distance. Screams. The crack of weapons fire. It was nothing like the training simulations. It was real and horrible and loud. The second thing he noticed was they were emerging from hiding places everywhere. Tall, thin beings with 6 limbs and large compound eyes. They moved strangely, their bodies bending in ways human bodies could not. But their fear was completely understandable. A young, barely more than a child, stumbled toward. The little one was covered in dust and shaking badly. Knelt down and tried to look as friendly as possible, which was difficult while wearing combat armor and carrying a weapon. "It is okay," he said slowly. "I'm here to help. You are safe now." The young did not understand his words, but seemed to understand his tone. The little one reached out with 2 of their limbs and grabbed onto his arm, felt something tighten in his chest. "I have a child here," he called to his squad leader. "What do I do?" "Take them to the safe zone. That is what we are here for." Picked up the young carefully and began moving toward the designated safe zone. Other soldiers were doing the same thing. Humans carrying children. Humans guiding elders. Humans standing guard while terrified refugees fled to safety. Above them, the battle continued. Ships exploded in orbit. Debris rained down like burning stars. But on the ground, something different was happening. For the first time in months, they were not alone. Someone was fighting for them. Someone was protecting them. Elder emerged from his bunker and saw human soldiers everywhere. They were organizing the refugees, treating the wounded, setting up defensive positions. They worked with speed and purpose, as if saving his people was the only thing that mattered. A human soldier approached him. It was a woman wearing officer insignia. She spoke through a translation device. "Elder, I am Lieutenant. We have established a secure perimeter. Your people can come out now. We will protect them." Felt tears forming in his eyes. For so long, he had watched his world die. For so long, he had prayed for help that never came. And now these strange beings from across the galaxy were risking their lives for strangers. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you come?" Lieutenant A looked at him with steady eyes. "Because you asked for help. That is all the reason we needed." The first day of ground operations ended with over 100,000 refugees reaching safety behind human lines. They tried several times to break through, but were pushed back each time. Human soldiers held their positions with fierce determination. That night sat against a ruined wall and ate a ration bar. The young he had saved was sleeping nearby, wrapped in a thermal blanket from his supply pack. Other soldiers rested around them, exhausted but alert. "We did good today," the squad leader said quietly. "But this is just the beginning. They will come back harder tomorrow." Looked at the sleeping child. "Then we will fight harder tomorrow." The squad leader smiled grimly. "That is the spirit, farmer." In orbit, Admiral reviewed the day's results. The human fleet had taken heavy losses, but so had the enemy. More importantly, they had achieved their objective. Ground forces were in place. Refugees were being protected. The tide of the war was beginning to turn. But knew the hardest battles were still ahead. They would not give up easily. They would bring more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. This war would be long and bloody. She looked out at the stars and thought of all the people counting on her. The soldiers fighting below, the hopping for salvation, the billions of humans back home who had sent them to this distant world. "We will not fail them," she whispered to herself. "Whatever it takes, we will not fail." The war stretched into months. The second human fleet arrived 2 weeks after the initial battle. Admiral watched from the bridge of the Iron Mountain as 80 fresh warships emerged from faster-than-light travel. Behind them came hundreds of transports carrying soldiers, supplies, and equipment. "Reinforcements have arrived," Ho announced, unable to hide the relief in his voice. "Signal the fleet commanders," ordered. "We begin the next phase immediately." They had retreated to the outer edges of the system after the initial battle. They had called for reinforcements of their own. Now both sides were building their strength for the next confrontation. On the ground, the situation was brutal. Human soldiers held a line around 3 major refugee zones, protecting nearly 2 million civilians. Every day, they tested their defenses. Every day, humans fought and died to keep the line intact. Lieutenant Sung coordinated supply operations from a forward base near the largest refugee zone. He was no longer the young officer he had been decades ago, but his experience was invaluable. He knew how to keep an army fed, armed, and functioning under impossible conditions. "We need more medical supplies," one of his assistants reported. "The field hospitals are running low." "Redirect the next 3 cargo drops to medical priority," Sung ordered, "and tell the Mercy Corps to ration what they have until then." The Mercy Corps had set up hospitals throughout the safe zones. Dr. Mi Young ran the largest one, a series of connected tents filled with wounded soldiers and sick refugees. She had not slept more than 4 hours at a time in weeks. "Another transport coming in," one of her nurses said. 30 wounded, 10 critical." Mi Young wiped sweat from her forehead and prepared for more surgery. "Get the operating room ready. We save everyone we can." She had lost count of how many lives had passed through her hands. Human soldiers with terrible burns, children with broken limbs, elderly who had survived the initial attacks but were now dying from disease and stress. Every patient was precious. Every death was a personal failure. One night, after a particularly difficult surgery, Mi Young walked outside the hospital tent and looked up at the sky. She could see flashes of light in orbit where ships were still fighting. She could hear distant explosions from the bombardment, and she could hear something else. Singing. A group of were gathered near the hospital entrance. They were making sounds with their bodies, rubbing their limbs together to create music. It was strange and beautiful. Mi-young did not understand the meaning, but she understood the feeling. It was a song of gratitude. A young approached her and pressed something into her hand. It was a small carved stone, simple but elegant. The spoke in their clicking language, and her translation device interpreted. "Thank you, you saved my family. This gift is small, but my thanks is big." Mi-young held the stone carefully. Tears filled her eyes. "You are welcome. This is why we came." Medic Bai worked at a smaller field hospital closer to the front lines. She treated wounds as fast as they came in, sometimes working on 3 patients at once. She had been trained as an engineer, but when the Mercy Corps needed volunteers with medical training, she had stepped forward. "You designed armor," one of the soldiers said as she bandaged his arm. "Now you are fixing soldiers. Strange career change." Bai smiled tiredly. "I like solving problems. A broken arm is just another problem to solve." The soldier laughed despite his pain. "You humans are crazy. You know that, right?" "So we have been told." The war continued to spread beyond the human fleets began attacking supply lines and forward bases throughout the region. They were forced to divert ships from the main battle to protect their territory. Commander led a strike force against a supply depot 3 light-years from Prime. Her ships appeared without warning, destroyed everything of value, and vanished before the enemy could respond. "That should slow down their reinforcements," she reported to Admiral. "Good work. Hit them again next week. Keep them off balance." The galaxy watched the war with growing amazement. The who had been undefeated for centuries were being fought to a standstill by a species that had only recently achieved. It seemed impossible. But the cost was high. Human casualties mounted with each passing week. Ships were lost. Soldiers died. Families back home received terrible news and wept for loved ones they would never see again. On New Sol, the wife of farmer received a message that he had been wounded in battle. She rushed to the communications center to call him directly. "I am fine," told her, his face visible on the screen. He had a bandage across his forehead and his arm was in a sling. "Just some scratches. I will be back on duty soon." "Come home," she pleaded. "You have done enough." Thought about the young he had saved on the first day. The little one was still alive, living in the refugee zone with what remained of their family. Every time saw them, the young one ran up to him and made happy clicking sounds. "I cannot come home yet," he said gently. "There are still people who need us. I will come home when the job is done." His wife cried, but she understood. She had married a good man. Good men did not leave when the work was unfinished. The 3rd human fleet arrived 2 months into the war. Then the 4th. Human space was emptying itself to support the war effort. Factories worked around the clock. Shipyards produced new vessels at an incredible rate. Every available resource was being directed toward one goal: victory. The war commander watched his intelligence reports with growing concern. His fleet had been reinforced twice, but the humans kept coming. For every human ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear. It was as if the entire human species had declared war against his empire. "They cannot sustain this," one of his advisors insisted. "No species can commit so completely to a war for strangers. They will exhaust themselves." But the war commander was not so sure. He had studied humans since the battle began. He had learned their history. He knew what they had done to each other in their past wars, and he was beginning to fear that his empire had made a terrible mistake. "They do not fight like other species," he said quietly. "They fight like beings who have nothing to lose, like beings who would rather die than surrender. I have never seen anything like it." "What do we do?" The war commander had no answer. For the first time in his long career, he did not know how to win. 6 months into the war, the human forces launched a major offensive. 5 fleets, over 400 warships, attacked the defensive lines simultaneously. Admiral commanded the assault from the Iron Mountain. "All ships advance," she ordered. "Today we break their back." The battle was the largest of the war. Ships filled the space above Prime, firing weapons and exploding in brilliant flashes of light. They fought desperately, knowing that defeat meant the end of their invasion. Captain led her attack group against the enemy flagship. Her ship took heavy damage, losing half its weapons and most of its shields. But she kept attacking, refusing to retreat. "Target their bridge," she ordered. "Everything we have." The Dawn Striker's final volley hit the flagship perfectly. The massive ship broke apart and exploded. Across the battlefield, ships began to lose coordination. Their central command was gone. "The enemy is retreating," Ho reported. "They are running." Admiral allowed herself a small smile. "Not running, fleeing. There is a difference." The Battle of Prime was a decisive victory. They lost over 200 ships. Their invasion fleet was shattered. The survivors fled toward space, pursued by human warships that gave them no rest. On the ground, soldiers watched the battle above and cheered when the ships began to flee. Refugees emerged from shelters and looked up at the sky with hope. Elder stood beside Lieutenant and watched the enemy retreat. "Is it over?" he asked. Shook her head. "Not yet, but we have won this battle. They will not threaten your world again. Now we take the fight to them." Was silent for a long moment, then he spoke softly. "Your people are remarkable. We owed you nothing. You owed us nothing, but you came anyway, you fought anyway, you died anyway. Why?" A thought about the question. She thought about all the soldiers who had given their lives, all the civilians who had sacrificed everything to support the war effort, all the humans who had answered the call to help strangers they would never meet. "Because it was the right thing to do," she said simply. "And sometimes that is all the reason you need." The war lasted 18 months. After the Battle of Prime, human forces pursued the across 3 star systems. Every supply depot was destroyed. Every military base was captured or burned. Every attempt by the to regroup was met with overwhelming force. Admiral led the final assault on the. Her fleet had grown to over 600 warships. Behind them came thousands of transport ships carrying soldiers, medical personnel, and reconstruction teams. Humanity had not just come to defeat the. Humanity had come to end the threat forever. The war commander watched the human fleet approach on his command screen. His empire was crumbling around him. His armies were shattered. His people were terrified. For the first time in history, they faced an enemy who would not stop, would not negotiate, and would not show mercy. "We cannot win," his last remaining advisor said. "We must surrender." The war commander knew it was true. He had fought many wars. He had conquered many species. But he had never faced anything like the humans. They fought with a fury that understanding. They sacrificed themselves for strangers without hesitation. They kept coming no matter how many of them died. "They should have ignored the signal," the war commander said bitterly. "They had nothing to gain from this war. Now look at us. Will they accept our surrender? We will find out." The surrender message was broadcast across all frequencies. It was simple and unconditional. The Empire admitted defeat and agreed to whatever terms the humans demanded. Admiral received the message on the bridge of the Iron Mountain. She read it 3 times before responding. "Tell them we accept," she said, "but the terms will be harsh. They must pay for what they have done." The surrender ceremony took place on the surface of the. Admiral stood in full dress uniform, surrounded by her senior officers. Across from her stood the war commander, his armor dull and his posture defeated. "Your empire is dissolved," declared. "Your military is dismantled. Your leaders will face trial for crimes against thee and other species you have destroyed. Your people will live under supervision until we are satisfied they no longer pose a threat to anyone." The war commander bowed his head. "As you command." "One more thing," his voice hardened. "You will pay reparations to you will help them rebuild everything you destroyed. Every city, every farm, every life you took will be repaid with labor and resources. This is not negotiable." The war commander looked up at her with something like respect in his eyes. "You could have simply destroyed us. Why did you not?" Thought about the question. The truth was, she had considered it. After everything she had seen, after all the death and suffering, a part of her had wanted to wipe them from existence. But that was not what humans were supposed to be. "Because we are not like you," she said finally. "We came to stop your violence, not to become like you. When you threatened innocence, we fought you. Now that you have stopped, the fighting is over. That is how civilized beings behave." The war commander had no response. He simply lowered his head again and accepted his fate. The news of the surrender spread across the galaxy within hours. Every species heard the story. A peaceful people had cried for help. The humans had answered, and against all odds the humans had won. The reaction was mixed. Some species celebrated the end of aggression. Others feared what humanity's victory meant for the galactic balance of power. The traders began making plans to increase business with humans. The elders revised their ancient predictions about the future. But no reaction was as powerful as the one on Prime. Elder stood in the ruins of his capital city and watched the news broadcast. Around him, millions of survivors gathered in the streets. They had lived through horror that no species should endure. They had watched their world burn, and now, against all hope, they were free. "The humans have won," announced to his people. "They have surrendered, we are safe." The sound that rose from the crowd was unlike anything had ever heard. It was crying and laughing and singing all mixed together. It was the sound of a species that had been saved from extinction. The human soldiers who had protected them for 18 months watched the celebration with tired smiles. Many of them had not seen their families in over a year. Many of them had lost friends and companions in the fighting. But in that moment, it all felt worth it. Farmer stood at the edge of the celebration, his arm still bandaged from a wound he had received 2 months earlier. The young he had saved on the first day was beside him, now much bigger and stronger than before. The young one reached out and grabbed his hand with 2 of their limbs. "Friend," the young said in broken human language. It had taken months, but some had begun learning to speak human words. "You stay, you live here." Knelt down to look the young one in the eyes. "No, little friend, I have to go home. I have a family waiting for me." The young made a sad clicking sound. "Miss you." "I will miss you too." Pulled out a small object from his pocket. It was a photograph of his family on New Sol. "Keep this. Remember that somewhere across the stars there is a human who will always care about you." The young took the photograph carefully and held it close. They did not fully understand what it meant, but they understood it was important. Dr. Mi-young finished her final shift at the field hospital. It was closing down now that the war was over. Wounded soldiers were being transferred to proper medical facilities. Sick were being sent to new hospitals built with human help. "What will you do now?" one of the nurses asked her. Mi-young looked around the tent where she had worked for so many months. She had saved hundreds of lives in this place. She had also lost patients despite her best efforts. Both would stay with her forever. "I am going to rest," she said. "Then I am going to help rebuild. They need doctors. I think I will stay for a while." The nurse smiled. "You are a good person, doctor." "I am just trying to do what is right." Admiral held a final briefing for her senior officers before the fleet departed. They had achieved everything they came to do. They were safe. They were defeated. Peace had been restored. "I am proud of all of you," told them. "What we accomplished here will be remembered for generations. We showed the galaxy what humanity stands for. We showed them that when innocents call for help, we answer. Commander Ho spoke up. Admiral, what happens now? The galaxy will be watching us more closely than ever. Nodded. Let them watch. Let them see who we really are. We are not conquerors. We are not predators. We are protectors. And as long as there are people in need, we will be there. The human fleet departed from space 6 months after the surrender. They left behind garrison forces to oversee the disarmament and reparation programs. They also left behind volunteers who chose to stay and help the rebuild. On the day the main fleet jumped back to human space, Elder broadcast a message to all human ships. His voice was translated through communication systems across hundreds of vessels. Humans, he said, my people owe you a debt we can never repay. You came when no one else would. You fought when no one else cared. You sacrificed your children, your resources, and your peace for strangers you had never met. We will never forget what you have done. For as long as we exist, we will remember the humans who saved us. We will tell our children, and they will tell their children, and the story will live forever. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. You asked for nothing in return. You wanted no payment, no territory, no power. You came simply because we asked for help. That makes you the most remarkable species the galaxy has ever known. Thank you. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you. Admiral listened to the message on her bridge. Around her, officers wiped tears from their eyes. Even the hardened veterans were moved. Helm said quietly, "Take us home." The fleet made the jump to faster-than-light speed. Stars blurred around them as they raced toward human space. Behind them, they left a liberated world and a defeated enemy. Ahead of them waited families, friends, and a civilization that would welcome them as heroes. The war was over. They were free. And humanity had proven something to the galaxy that would never be forgotten. When someone pleads for help, humanity answers. Not with words, not with thoughts and prayers, not with half measures and excuses. Humanity answers with total war, and heaven help anyone who makes that necessary.